The Heat kick off their semifinal series versus the Knicks on Sunday, so we'll get you ready with everything you need to know for the matchup. Can Jimmy Butler keep this going? How can the Heat stop Jalen Brunson? And will injuries once again play a factor? We break it all down in our series preview here on Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. I'm Wes Goldberg here with David Ramil. However you might be tuning in on YouTube or your favorite podcast app, thanks so much for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. We're recording this on Thursday afternoon. You're hearing this on a Friday morning. We're still coming down from that Jimmy Butler performance, the Heat beating the Bucks in 5 games. But look, just like that, for the Heat, there's not much time to linger since we have a second-round series to look forward to. Heat Knicks. Game 1, Sunday at MSG. We're going to preview the series, talk matchups, X factors, and of course, give you our prediction in a minute. But let's start with the main question here. We're going to do this just hitting the main questions of this series. And the first one, I think, is how are the Knicks going to defend Jimmy Butler? I've got a few stats for you before we kind of get into the nitty-gritty here. Jimmy Butler wasn't the best in the regular season against the Knicks. The Knicks threw basically 2 main guys at him. It was either Quentin Grimes or Josh Hart after they acquired Hart before the trade deadline. When Grimes was Jimmy's primary defender, Jimmy shot 7 of 16 overall. Hart was able to hold Jimmy Butler to 4 of 10 shooting in 3 games. Now, there's a lot of other kind of matchups sprinkled in there. Jimmy Butler went mismatch hunting quite a bit against the Knicks, whether it was one of their kind of slower centers to try to get by them. Julius Randle maybe go up against a smaller Jalen Brunson and things like or Emmanuel Quickly. But I think the Knicks are primarily going to throw Grimes and Josh Hart at Jimmy Butler as much as possible. The question, I think, is, do those guys have a better chance to limit Jimmy Butler more than Jrue Holiday and the Milwaukee Bucks did?
No, and I wonder whether or not Tom Thibodeau is going to be sending the double, unlike Mike Budenholzer, which may or may not cost Budenholzer his job. I think that's, a lot of the talk now is whether or not Bud even continues to coach Milwaukee, and partly because it just seemed like they insisted on keeping Jrue Holiday on Jimmy 100% of the time, or as much as possible, or Giannis himself saying, "I wish I could have defended Jimmy more." I don't know how much of that falls on Giannis, how much of that falls on Budenholzer, but either way, they didn't do a very good job of limiting Jimmy Butler. So I wonder whether or not Thibodeau, as familiar as he is with Jimmy Butler and his game, having coached him for a number of years, decides that maybe it's time to send the double that way. Grimes seemed like he was more effective, at least in keeping Jimmy a little unbalanced. I think Josh Hart's defense is fine. I also think it's probably something that Jimmy can expose more effectively. I think Hart is a little bit more foul prone than Grimes is. Grimes is a better on-ball defender. He'll kind of break up passes. He'll make things uncomfortable. He'll deny the ball.
They're both really good at navigating screens, though, and that was one of the things that stood out about Jrue Holiday. Jrue Holiday is one of the best at that, but Grimes does a good job getting skinny and going over the screen. Josh Hart just kind of goes through whoever the screener is. That dude is strong. He's cut from a very similar cloth as a lot of, Miami Heat defenders over the years. I actually think Josh Hart does a pretty good job against Jimmy when Jimmy tries to get into the post. He's strong enough. He's got enough lower body strength to just make sure that he's not getting bowled over there. Again, Jrue Holiday did the same thing, but I think Hart and Grimes could do a good job. I don't think that there's even that much of a drop off between those guys and Jrue Holiday. I think that there's probably a little bit of a drop off, but when you bring the Thibodeau part into the equation, it's a really good note by you, because I think just by virtue of having him as your head coach over Mike Budenholzer, you're going to be better prepared defensively. I think that I think those two guys are going to be tough assignments for Jimmy Butler to go up against. I don't think that he can overlook them. I don't think that he will overlook them. And just like it did against Jrue Holiday, I think it's going to come down to Jimmy Butler making tough shots or not.
You've got another factor there to consider too, is that they're not relying on Hart's or Grimes' offense. Like it's certainly complementary. Like Grimes can hit the occasional corner three. Hart can get to the basket a little bit. He's not much of a shooter from the outside. But the
Had a
thing
good
was
first
with
round
Drew,
series, a little bit.
yeah, with Drew exerting himself as much as he was at the defensive end, clearly his offense struggled. That would have been a factor in Milwaukee's favor. So they can kind of just lean into saying, you know what, I'm going to be the Butler stopper. I'm going to be the Jimmy stopper in this series because you don't have to rely on me for anything else. And just send me out there for 30 minutes. I'll, hand check him, throw a little elbow his way, make things difficult, use that physicality, especially Hart, and just kind of, just get into Jimmy a little bit and try and make things a little bit uncomfortable there. So if that's the case, we could see them being slightly more effective than what Holiday was. I mean, it's not a knock on Holiday.
And they do. They'll have one of them on the court. The other thing with Milwaukee is once Drew Holiday was off the court, they didn't really know who to put on him. And then you saw Jimmy Butler. You saw Jimmy Butler just taking advantage of Chris Middleton and anybody else who basically wasn't Drew Holiday. The Knicks could toggle between Grimes and Hart, and they do already, and they will against Jimmy Butler and the Miami Heat. On the other side of that, the Heat have had a really hard time guarding Jalen Brunson this year. Jalen Brunson's had an awesome season. He might make an All-NBA team. The primary defender against Brunson in the regular season was Jimmy Butler and Gabe Vincent. Jimmy Butler had a really hard time staying in front of him. Brunson was 7 of 12 in 3 games. Brunson didn't play one of the 4 games that the Heat and the Knicks played together against each other this year. But there was a number. I went back and watched the film this afternoon, David, and there was a number of times where, like, Jimmy Butler just didn't really know what to do. Like, Brunson's kind of slithery. It's kind of like guarding a smaller Jimmy Butler, right? There's a lot of pump fakes, a lot of pivots, a lot of shoulder movements and head fakes. It's really difficult.
He's difficult too. Like he kind of pushes off a little bit, gets a little space going that way when he drops that shoulder, and then he kind of like leans with a spinner in the paint, and then he gets he's able to get that layup over a primary.
And he's really smart, just like, and he kind of takes advantage of the gray areas in the game. And I was watching one play where he basically just shows the ball. He kind of does this half spin move, shows the ball to Jimmy, knowing that Jimmy's going to want to steal that ball. He knows it, and he baits him. And as soon as Jimmy reaches, he brings the ball back, goes the other way, and has a wide open layup at the basket. And it's that kind of thing that Jalen Brunson does routinely, right? And it's, again, very, very similar to Jimmy Butler. So there was a number of plays where I think Jalen Brunson has a really underrated first step. And he just kind of gets by him. He's very shifty. The timing when he comes off of these screens is just sort of one of its own. He's shifty. He's got his own little weird timings, he's a little slow-mo.
He's not a great athlete per se, but what he does have with a high IQ, I think the Jimmy Butler comparison is a really apt one because, again, I think you could say that Jimmy is a great athlete, but he doesn't stand out in the way, let's say, a Giannis Antetokounmpo does or anything like that. And yet,
or John Morant or something like that,
Right. Given what Brunson has athletically, physically, he knows how to use that. He's stocky. He uses that strength. He's not the quickest, but he does have a quick first step at his timing, the repertoire in which he kind of dives into the lane and creates that space and those open looks for himself. Unparalleled. He's had a fantastic season. He was one of the most improved players in the league for a year, and he's had a very, very good season. I thought he was more deserving all-star than Julius Randle, to be honest with you.
Exactly. And definitely some people, I think they're going to split the vote on all NBA also. And I thought just watching Randall's numbers were amazing, no doubt about it.
Sure.
But watching the Knicks as much as I did this year, it was Jalen Brunson was the engine of that thing. And he was responsible for the Knicks' success as anybody else, more so probably. But the other guy is going to be Gabe Vincent. I think he's going to get a lot towards the end of the last matchup at the end of March. Gabe got quite a bit of that assignment. I think Spo made a decision. And so I think I'll be interested to see what Spo does to start game 1 on Sunday afternoon. Is it Gabe Vincent who gets the Jalen Brunson assignment?
I think
or is he going to have Jimmy do it right away? I think it's going to be Gabe right away, but both of them are going to have quite a bit of time. I'll say this, between Jimmy Butler and Jalen Brunson, this series is going to send a new Guinness World Record of pump fakes and shoulder swerves and pivot moves. Like it's going to be a whole lot of jerky stuff in this series.
I think, now that we're seeing a slightly revitalized Kyle Lowry, I wonder how much of the assignment he gets as well. Because I know he was missing a couple of those matchups, and we were denied that opportunity to see that. Because I think that could be what did you call it in one game? The foul off, the pump fake off. I don't know what it was that you called it, but I remember you saying something to that effect because it would the opportunity to see both of them just flop off. Maybe you called it.
It was a flop off.
A flop off. To see them both kind of just sell that contact and throw themselves in
Yeah.
opposite directions would have been hilarious. But I think I could see Lowry taking that matchup
Yeah.
a little bit just to save Jimmy on the defensive end.
He'll get his turn, right? I mean, both of them
No
are.
doubt.
It's all going to happen. Who are the biggest X factors in this series, and could we expect another starting lineup change for the Miami Heat? That's coming up next. But first, David, tell listeners about our sponsors.
Today's episode is brought to you by Nissan's Most Electric Player of the Week, brought to you by the all-new, all-electric 2023 Nissan Ariya. Well, with the Heat Knicks renewing their series, their rivalry in the semifinals here, I thought it would be interesting to go back to a player in time during the original Heat Knicks rivalry, the most electric player in that series. For all that, Alonzo Mourning is beloved by Heat fans. The blocks, the scowling, the confrontations with Patrick Ewing. I don't think there was a more electric player in those matchups than Tim Hardaway Sr. He was just everything that you could look to in a basketball player, rising to the challenge, knocking down those threes. I don't know if you would call him brilliantly elegant like you would the Nissan Ariya, but he did have a poetry to him when he was bombing those three-pointers and guys like Chris Childs' face and things of that sort, Allen Houston, etc. Although I shouldn't mention Allen Houston's name too much, but if you're looking for more polish, more style, maybe Tim Hardaway's game isn't exactly for you, but you could find that in the all-new Nissan Ariya. Fiercely elegant, stunningly powerful, elegant, just everything that you might be looking for in an SUV, much less an all-electric SUV. The 2023 Nissan Ariya packs pin-to-your-seat power and premium intelligence all in one electric vehicle. An all-new, all-electric 2023 Nissan Ariya, the EV for people who love to drive. Shop now at nissanusa.com. Today's episode is also brought to you by BetterHelp. If you're looking to just find somebody to talk to, if you want a sounding board for whatever you may have going on, I know that it's hard to find that right person, but BetterHelp makes it so easy for you. They connect you to a network of therapists. A friend of mine wanted to go see somebody, wanted to talk to a therapist, and he had never done it before. And I suggest, you know what, we're doing this ad read for BetterHelp. He tried it. He found somebody, connected with him. After a couple sessions, thought maybe he needed to go in a different direction, found somebody else. He's happier than ever. He's talking regularly, and he's really enjoyed the process because you can just find the right person that you might want to talk to using BetterHelp. Again, that network of specialists to get you started. Discover your potential with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Every dayers, we're going to be back Sunday with a recap of Game 1 between the Heat and the Knicks. Let's talk X factors for the series before we make our series predictions. Number one, Julius Randle and his health. He tweaked that same left ankle that he hurt in the last meeting between the Heat and the Knicks at the end of March. Did not look good at the time. His status for Sunday is still unclear. He's obviously a huge loss for the Knicks if he can't go or if he's even limited at all. So the first one is just got to be Julius Randle. If Randle can't go, Obi Toppin is probably going to be the starting power forward for the New York Knicks. He had a really good first round series, Toppin did, and kind of finished the end of the season strong for them. So, but it's still going to be a drop off if Julius Randle can't go, because we remember Julius Randle, how effective he's been against Miami this year. Had, of course, that heart wrenching game winning 3-pointer in Miami. But overall on the boards, scoring, demands Bam Adebayo's attention. It's going to be a big deal if he can't go, if he's limited.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. He is quick in transition, so they kind of look to, if they get a stop on one end, they outlet to top, and he's a very good athlete, good dunker, obviously. Can shoot to corner three. I wouldn't count on him as being as much of a threat as Randle, but certainly brings a different factor to New York's offense, and he can provide a little boost there. He won't be the primary assignment, but he can still be dangerous in his own way. So you have to be aware of him when he's out on the floor. And you can't get caught, ball watching like RJ Barrett or Brunson or somebody else go to work. You can't just leave these guys wide open either, because as we saw in the Bucks series, those kind of players can step up and hurt Miami in a certain way. So definitely somebody to keep an eye on there.
Anybody else on the Knicks side of things that you would consider an X factor?
RJ Barrett, I think, is a big one. He started off the Cavs series struggling a little bit, then kind of found his footing. And I think the Knicks go the way that Barrett goes. He's He's always seemed to take that matchup with Tyler Herro a little personally. I know a lot of people have made the comparison, same draft class or whatever.
Sure.
And I think Barrett's a fine player, and we could see him being that kind of an X factor. He can stretch the floor, he can dive to the rim, he can create opportunities for himself and others. And so if that's the case, I could see that being a big factor.
What did he have?
Favor.
30 points against the Heat at Madison Square Garden? It was in that win where Tyler Herro almost won the game with that open 3-pointer that happened right in front of me, and that was exciting.
Yeah.
But
Mitchell Robinson too. I think that's another one. Like his rebounding was such a force against the Cavaliers, and he's a different kind of threat, and in some ways more dangerous of a threat than Brook Lopez, just because he's so much more explosive. And we'll talk about the starting lineup for Miami, the different choices that they have. But Kevin Love was effective-ish in his kind of ability to stay with Lopez. I don't think he can stay with Mitchell Robinson at all, because that's just an explosive athlete. He's going to catch lobs. He's going to get put back dunks. It's very, very different than kind of just slowly.
Lopez is more ground bound,
closing out a shot. Yeah.
And Mitchell Robinson's
got the height,
leap
sure,
up and go get that. And Kevin Love is not leaping right now or at any point in his career. Right. The Knicks gobbled up 39.4% of available offensive rebounds in their first round matchup. And you might say, well, maybe it was it wasn't. They were playing the Cleveland Cavaliers, who are enormous. They start Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen. The fact that Mitchell Robinson was able to do that kind of damage on the board, and obviously that's not all Mitchell Robinson, but the Knicks are a very good rebounding team, right? Like Josh Hart, even Jalen Brunson will get in there and mix it up for some rebounds. Julius Randle averaged 10 rebounds a game this season. Like, that is a good rebounding team. With or without Randall, it's a good rebounding team, and a big part of that is Mitchell Robinson. And then when Robinson's out, they got Isaiah Hartenstein in there, who's doing a lot of the same things. So, the offensive boards are going to be huge. Let's just do the starting lineup conversation. It was a bit of a teaser tease. I don't think that the Heat are going to change their starting lineup. I feel like you kind of have to have Kevin Love in there for game one and just see how he matches up. The boxing out is going to be really important. I actually thought that the Cavs did not do a great job, despite their size, of just getting bodies on bodies.
Mobley can get pushed out of the way a little bit, and I think that cost them a lot.
Yeah, the Heat, for the most part, are a very good boxing out team. They kind of do their homework there, and that's going to be big against Mitchell. It kind of tailed off at the end of the regular season, but it
didn't seem that way against Lopez. But there's only so much you can do about it against a guy who's 7 foot plus. Between him and Giannis, those are two excellent rebounders.
And it might be easier to almost kind of get a body into Mitchell Robinson. He's a little bit more slight than Brook Lopez. And if you can kind of just shove him out of the way early when the shot goes up, again, way easier said than done. Mitchell Robinson is one of the best offensive rebounders in the NBA, if not the best offensive rebounder in the NBA, for a reason. So that's going to be an X factor. It's a good call. Do you agree with me on the starting lineup? We think we see the same thing.
Yeah.
Vincent,
I could
Strus,
see
Jimmy.
I think it will start off that way, and again, if injuries won't play a factor, then you'll probably keep it going. But I think Spo is willing to put the game in Jimmy's hands and see what he can do to guide them to a victory in game one. And he's still comfortable enough to make whatever changes are necessary. He's done that a number of times against the Bucks. He's done that a number of times in his playoff history. So that's what a 7-game series is, an opportunity to make changes, make adjustments, figure out what works best for your team and what you can do to minimize their strengths. I wouldn't mind seeing Cody Zeller get a shot, not necessarily as a starter, but I could see him get a little bit of
I think he'll get minutes.
Because I think he has the physicality, the size, etc. I think it would be an interesting match. He can certainly match up with Hartenstein too, so I like that combination.
I think one of the other X factors that we kind of have to look at, more of a swing factor, I think. The rebounding we already talked about in the regular season. The Heat in this matchup were out rebounded by the Knicks by quite a bit. It was like 41-34 per game or something like that. But the big thing, the equalizer, I think, could be takeaways for Miami. They averaged 14.8 takeaways in this matchup during the regular season and only gave the ball away 10.8 times per game. So when you're talking about the possession battle, right, which is a big thing that the Heat need to try to win, takeaways and creating turnovers, and obviously the points that come off of those turnovers, getting on the break and getting those easy buckets, obviously a factor. But just pure equalizing the possession battle, I think the takeaways is the big thing. Jalen Brunson does a pretty good job of taking care of the ball, but that's not necessarily the case for the other guys on the Knicks. They can cough it up every once in a while. Yeah. So I think that could be big. And then you talk about maybe a starting lineup change. That's where Caleb Martin comes in. He's so great at those takeaways. Probably not enough to start him. I still think you want Kevin Love's size in this matchup, but this could be a big Caleb Martin series too if he's as impactful as he was the first 4 games.
Right.
of that Buck series.
Yeah. Like I could totally see that. It's going to be interesting. There's a lot of different possibilities. I know we're going to still get into some additional X factors here, but this is a very different series because now we have the heightened expectations. I think there was so many from us and other fans, however different they'd like to chime in now. I think the expectations for Miami against Milwaukee were so much lower. But now that we've seen kind of the ceiling of what they can do, and we've seen Jimmy reach his historic heights, it's very unusual because now the question isn't, well, can he do it at all? It's can he duplicate what he was able to do against the Bucks, and who rises up to the challenge to complement what playoff Jimmy can do? Because it's Max Strus, it's Duncan Robinson, it's Kevin Love and big nights, Kyle Lowry having his moments, Caleb. So many different role players stepping up in those respective roles and playing a high level, and Jimmy taking over games and dominating what had been one of the best defenses in the league. New York, not as good defensively, and yet they're playing very good defense. Their wing defense against Donovan Mitchell, one of the best scorers in the NBA, was fantastic. They really challenged them. They finished their series off against what had been, I think, the series favorite and Cleveland Cavaliers. They did the same thing Miami did. They went into Cleveland. They won Game 5 there. They were able to establish their identity early on and consistently throughout the series, similarly to what Miami did. So
a lot of people thought that was going to be a 7-game series, right? And that was, to me, a toss-up going into that, and the Knicks just dismantled them. A big part of that was their depth. A big part of that was the performances of their best players. You mentioned whether or not the Heat could duplicate the kind of performance they had in their series against Milwaukee. Well, that's coming up next when we make our predictions. Can the Heat pull off another upset and beat the Knicks? Because the Knicks are the team that's favored in this series as well. We're going to give our predictions next and finish up our X factors. But first, David, tell listeners about our sponsor.
Today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. For a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay's guaranteed fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know the part will fit, or you get your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay's guaranteed fit only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only, and exclusions do apply.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Every dayers, we are going to be back Sunday evening with a recap of Game 1 between the Heat and the Knicks. You can reach us on Twitter, Instagram, email us, lockedonheat@gmail.com. We're going to get to our predictions here in just a second, but let's finish up our X Factors. I got 2 more notes for you, David. The Heat's three-point shooting, you mentioned it right before we went to break there. They're shooting 45% on threes in the playoffs. The Knicks against the Cavs shot 28.2%. Both of those numbers are unsustainable, right? At some point, the Heat are going to cool off, and at some point, the Knicks are going to shoot closer to their regular season average, which was 35.7%, which was, I think, league average. Yeah, 19th in the league, but the Heat were much worse. So the Heat are going to cool off. The Knicks are going to heat up. The question is, when does that happen? Right? That's the biggest question. It's going to happen. The question is when. So that's one thing. I don't know that there's that much worth carving into that. It's just sort of like it's a variance thing. I guess it'll happen when it happens.
It could stay hot too. Like I don't think anybody going into that series predicted that Miami would be able to continue shooting that well consistently.
I'm going to go on. I'm going to make a prediction I feel pretty strongly about. The Heat will not be shooting 45% from 3 when the series is over.
They're going to be shooting 50%. Nice, Wes. Way to go. That's bold, buddy. I can't believe you made that. All right.
And then the bench. It was a strength of Miami's in that first round series. I think, Milwaukee entered that series the deeper team. That's not a controversial take. And yet the Heat's depth is the one that stepped up, and they ended up being the deeper team when the series was over. In the regular season, the Heat's bench had a net rating of minus 1.1 per 100 possessions, which was 22nd in the NBA. The Knicks, they had one of the best benches in the NBA. They were outscoring teams by 1.9 points every 100 possessions. That was 4th in the NBA. So that's another X factor when you look at this is, can the Knicks bench step up the way that it has basically all season and against the Cavs? And can the Heat kind of maintain that ground with them?
Right. And it could be thinner too. If Julius Randle misses time, Toppin
Hmm.
inserted into the starting lineup, all of a sudden that bench production kind of dwindles a little bit. From Miami side of things, you mentioned Caleb Martin. He's going to be a big factor in Miami's favor. He's the strength of Miami's bench. Lowry, if he's able to continue to play as
and this is why you did the whole maintenance thing with Lowry, and you brought him off the bench, and you did the minutes maintenance thing, so that he would be fresh for the playoffs. He was great against the Bucks. It's going to be a big series for him too.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious to see how many minutes Duncan Robinson plays, because I think that's still. It seems like he was just on fire against the Bucks, and I wonder if he can keep that going.
If he keeps making shots, he's going to keep getting out there.
Yeah.
All right, we've talked it through. FanDuel has the Knicks as the slight favorite at -158. The Heat are +134. Just quick translation, basically as close to even as it gets. I mean, it's not a toss-up, but it's really close to a toss-up. It basically equates to like a 58% chance that the Knicks win this series. So that again, close to even.
Yeah, home team, they get that advantage that way.
Yep, Game 7 would be at home if it gets that far. At Madison Square Garden, home court advantage tends to mean something there. It was a great crowd in that Cavaliers series, and they are up for it. And we know that they are.
Can I ask you that question? I'm glad you brought it up there, because everybody's kind of saying, and I know it's the lore of New York and everything else. And you got Stephen A. Smith already yelling and screaming and doing what he does. Is Jimmy Butler gonna crumble under the lights of the Garden? Is he gonna fall apart? Because that's everybody's expectation is, oh, he did it. He did it in Miami.
That's a little bit. I feel like you're Scarecrow arguing a little bit now, but
you really don't think so? I mean, again,
everybody.
Smith, I think Knicks fans believe that Jimmy Butler is not going to be able to do this in this situation. Like, he did it against Milwaukee. He did it against Boston last year.
If it's anything less than 37% or 37 points per game on 60% shooting, does that count as him crumbling underneath the lights of Madison Square Garden? No.
You're like Eric Hammond asking Giannis if it's a failure. No, it's not a failure if he shoots under 37 points per game. I think I just wondered. It's a bigger stage, and there's a lot of the whole lore of the Mecca, the Garden, and all this. And it's
I do not think that Jimmy Butler is going to be bothered by playing at MSG. I do wonder if the Heat's role players are going to be affected by playing at MSG.
Fair.
I think
that's it. That's what I wanted to hear.
And that's again, it goes back to our X factors. So you keep putting it off, David. Though, do you want to make a prediction on this?
I do not.
You don't? Are you going to?
I don't think. Yeah, I don't. I didn't make one against the Milwaukee Bucks, so it's just for superstitious nature. I'm not going to make one now. I am concerned about the New York Knicks. I don't see what Miami did against the Bucks as something that they can continue to duplicate as consistently. They're very different teams. I think Miami, however, is up to the challenge of New York. I think Heat in 6. Okay, let's say Heat in 6.
You went from not making a prediction to predicting Heat in 6. Okay, you talked yourself into it. I appreciate that. That's what I've been hoping to try to do on the series. Going into this into this episode before we started recording here, David, I still didn't. I knew we had to make predictions, and I kind of went back and forth, like, how did the Heat win? How did the Knicks win? And you kind of envision the path, and then you think, okay, well, this is the path to this team winning. Which path is the more likely one to happen? And I really don't know, because the Knicks, the offense, they couldn't score, man, against the Cavs, but the Cavaliers' defense is very good, A, and B, very different than the Heat's, right? It's a lot of size that they put between the ball handler and the basket, and the Heat just don't operate that way. They kind of do, they're fronting a lot, they're switching a lot, they're trying to jump passing lanes. It's going to be very different. If the Heat can do that, then I think they have a chance. Offensively, the Knicks were really good. One of the top 5 or 6 in the NBA in the regular season. Yeah. Like, that is a team that can score. The Julius Randle question is a tough one. If he were 100% healthy, I think I would go with the Knicks, and I don't think I would think that hard about it as a prediction.
I don't know. I think that Bam could do the same job on Randle that he did against Giannis.
That's the thing, is if Bam is playing like that too, and Bam is going to get that assignment just like he did in the regular season.
And he should.
So
and he did a fantastic job on
it. It's the home court advantage, I think, matters. The Heat, I think last I checked, were actually favored in Game 1 at Madison Square Garden. So if they could do the same thing that they did against the Bucks and just steal Game 1 on the road, that is the path. They have to win one of these first 2, and I think they kind of have to win the first one.
Yep.
To kind of keep the good times rolling and keep that momentum going.
Yeah. Kind of punch him in the mouth a little bit. they're going to recoil. They're going to figure it out in game 2, etc. And then you come back to Miami. And then the thing is, Miami doesn't present the same kind of home court advantage because of, unfortunately, the number of Knicks fans in attendance at a Kaseya Center. So
I will push back against that a little bit. I was at one of those Madison Square Garden games, and there was a lot of Heat fans. I think we
it's not
share
50-50.
home court.
It's
not
not
50-50 in Miami either. I think they're just loud. It's not 50-50. It's like a 55-45. But I
by degrees. By degrees.
But I think we share home courts. It's just like we share cities. We share home courts. It's fine. Everybody in New York and Miami goes.
Are there
back
Miami
anyway.
transplants in New York? Is that how it works out?
Yes, absolutely. Most of my high school is in New York now. It feels like.
That's Broward. Who cares?
They're still Heat fans.
Sure, I guess.
They're not Magic fans. If you can't
Magic
tell, I
fans
already
aren't Magic
accused you
fans.
of putting it off. I'm the one putting it off. I don't want to make a prediction here. I don't know. I have no idea.
You got to.
I do. Why?
Yeah, because
you're telling me.
Yes, it's the rules of the show. We can't just waltz out of here with that one. This was different. Like we were talking about the Bucks game. Remember, there was the play-in game against Chicago, and they were taking on the Bucks like 2 days later. There was no time for a preview. This is a little bit more time to kind of digest, think about it. Here we are, fresh off that big win, 98 points in 2 games. Who has it? Who takes it seriously?
I hate that I'm doing this.
Heat in 4. Wow,
I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go Knicks in 7.
Whoa! Oh, that's not what I wanted to hear. Well, that's okay.
Our
listeners are familiar with your brand of pessimism.
It's been my it's all right. It's been my strategy all along. It's been it's been working.
Continue with the pessimism.
It's right. I'm going to continue with the pessimism. The last thing I want to do is jinx this team. I'm going to go Knicks in 7. Okay. Real listeners know what I'm doing. Real listeners know what I'm doing here. Real listeners know. All right. Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Remember to subscribe to new episodes of Locked On Heat on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Everydayers, we're going to be back Sunday evening with a recap of Game 1 between the Heat and Knicks. We're going to be recording immediately after the final buzzer, so make sure you're tuning in. Thanks so much for listening. Thanks so much for joining me, David.
You got it, Wes.